Today, my guest is Tricia Huffman. Tricia is a podcast host, speaker, manager of integrity to Grammy Award-winning artists, and founder of Joyologist. While living out her first dream as a touring sound engineer, she saw that everyone, including the people we think have it all, often don't feel fulfilled and fight doubts, worries, and compare themselves to others daily. With her background in knowledge in self-care and wellness, she first created her Joyology to keep artists healthy, grounded, and inspired in body and mind while on tour. She now spreads her mission to claim joy daily via her empowering social media posts, Real Talk podcast, coaching work, product line, and Own Your Awesome Daily Inspiration app. She's based in Los Angeles, where she's raising her strong-willed, independent, creative daughters and effing the shoulds while claiming joy daily. You can learn more about Tricia and her work at triciahuffman.com and follow her on social media at Tricia Huffman and Your Joyologist. I first connected with Tricia when Sarah Bareilles, a classmate of mine at UCLA and well-known singer-songwriter, posted a photo of one of her journals. I've been following Tricia ever since and so appreciate her encouragement for all of us to become free of conditioning that keeps us small. I hope you enjoy our conversation today, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the How We Can Heal podcast. My name is Lisa Danilchuk, and I created this podcast to share deep conversations that encourage us to move through life's toughest circumstances. Let's get talking about how we can heal. All right, Tricia, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you because you are a joyologist, yes, and I feel like if I move on from being a therapist, that's probably the next profession I'd like to be. Or maybe I'll just start thinking of myself as a joyologist while I'm doing therapy. But I feel like there's so much inspiration in that, and we've been through really heavy times lately, and I know people are like, I need something to look forward to, and I need some kind of joy or inspiration in my life. So I think this is perfect timing. So thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
My first question is just, how did you become a joyologist? Can you give us a little into what that journey was like for you?
Yeah. Short story, long story. I'm not sure. First of all, so the title was given to me. I'll have to tell some backstory on my life.
Oh, please. It can be the long version. I love this, the story of your life that led, because it's never like, I mean, rarely.
It's like it's
spoke
hard
up.
for me to just like be like this because so many things are affected by different things.
Yeah.
So my dream career was to be a live sound engineer, tour with bands doing their sound, so controlling what you hear.
Yes.
And I did it. I made it happen. It was super hard work and I loved it. It was an amazing life. And my father passed away suddenly when I was like about to get on a plane to Australia.
Ooh.
And I was like shattered, but flew home for the funeral instead, and then went straight to Australia from the funeral. Like I was like, no, I'm going to Australia. And before that, I really bottled up my emotions.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't realize it until I had to like force myself to allow myself to cry at the funeral, like at the very end when nobody was there. And so once it finally happened, I was like, from now on, you let emotion flow. If emotion is present, you let it flow. You don't have to question it. Just let it go. Because I guess I had, had these like, no, crying is wrong or weak or whatever, like these things inside of me, right? They were like, nope, you're good. Don't cry.
It's such a strong pattern. I'm a therapist and I tell people this stuff all the time. Crying's great. Let the emotion move. I can tell you, like, within the last month, I was in therapy and I was like, and I have the like hold it back feeling. I'm like, where is that? Like, are you kidding me? I have two parents that are therapists. I'm a therapist myself. Why would I ever hold back crying? But we
it's like this
do, right?
natural reaction.
Yeah.
But then I was like, no tears. So anyway, I had that sort of conversation myself, like after a like really like that moment in the funeral, which I haven't thought about or talked about in a while, like really letting it go and like really like being there. Oh my gosh, I think I'll tell the whole story. That's okay.
Go for it, please.
So like
Take
I
us
said,
on the whole journey.
I was like,
That's how we
okay, I
really
still
get
went
to
into
know.
operation mode, funeral this. Okay, we got to do this, that. I was like sitting in the front. I was like, okay, I'm going to talk at my dad's funeral. Of course, my sister was too like, no. And his brother wanted to talk. And so I was like, I'm definitely going to talk. And then, the priest or whoever was doing the thing was like, okay, now his daughter's going to talk. And I stood up and I started to cry for the first time.
Mm.
And my family around me was even like, "Oh, it's okay, Trisha, just sit. It's okay. We know you like whatever." And I was like, "No, I'm going to talk." And I
Yeah.
allowed myself to like sob and gave my speech, whatever. But again, like bottled up. And then after the funeral, I was like frozen, could not move. People came up to say goodbye to me and like my friends, and I could not stand up. So everybody was
Wow.
like up, and I'm still there. And I knew I had to cry, but I wouldn't like let myself. And I
Wow.
finally was again like, "You're at your funerals or your father's funeral, Trisha. Like, it is okay to cry.
Yeah.
You are allowed to cry." Like, I knew it was in there. And I let it out, and it was like the gnarliest, like a lion is dying.
Yeah. It's big.
Sobbing. And then I
Yeah.
even was like, I really feel like I want to like get down on my hands and knees. Like he was cremated and we thought it was ridiculous to buy a coffin for that. So it was just like a big picture there, which I thought
Mhm.
was good. So anyway, like I felt like I wanted to crawl on the ground and I did it. And it was like, and again, like family would come in and sort of like, let's remove you. And I was like, no,
Yeah.
I'm like,
I'm
just
feeling
let
this.
me
I need where
feel
else am I
this.
gonna do this? Like, do you want
Yeah.
me to do this in a therapist's office a year from now? Like, let me do it now.
Yeah, and so, but so again, like, it was, like, so, like, in many ways, like, embarrassing, but I was just like,
Mhm.
"No, I'm not, like, I am owning this and I'm owning my feelings," and so I made this commitment to myself to never, like, stop the tears. So again, I flew to Australia. I luckily at the time had these huge, gigantic black sunglasses, lucked
Mm.
out, because I was sobbing constantly on that tour.
Mhm.
I was so
Mhm.
happy to be there, and they were like my family, and it was like the perfect people to be with. But I was a mess, and I was supposed to be on tour the entire like year, and like for this album cycle. And I just kept feeling like I know I can't do this anymore. I was just like the fact of my dad dying suddenly, and then also it suddenly snapped me into I was miserable because
Yeah.
I had just lost my father, and it was like shocking. But it looked like everywhere I went, everyone was miserable.
Yeah.
And I did realize I don't know what's going on with these people and what's happening in
Mm.
their life. But I also was like, you don't know what could happen to you. My dad slipped and hit his head, got a
Oh,
concussion, and died of hypothermia.
what?
Yeah.
Oh,
So, like, you really don't know
you don't. You
what
really
can
don't.
happen. It's
Yeah.
bananas. And so I think, like, the details of his death, which we didn't even know, it took, like, weeks to get the autopsy. It was just your father has been found dead with a head injury, a head contusion.
Wow.
So for like months, what happened? But
Right.
I was just like, yeah, I don't know what happened. And so I just was like so present to people all around the world that just looked miserable in their lives. And I just had this inside, like, I just want to shake people up and be like, what are you doing? Like, this is your life. You don't know what's going to happen. Like, why are you
Yeah.
so miserable? Like, what can you do? Like, can you make a different choice or a change? Like, what's happening with you? I was
Yeah.
like so pissed off. And I just knew as much as I love my career, there was something in telling me that like I have to like stop and I have to go away. So I ended up quitting my life. I didn't
Wow.
even have a place to live. Because I toured most of the time and like traveled on my own. I didn't have money saved up because you would tour and then you have time off, and I would just go do whatever I wanted to do and live my life. Like it was an
Yeah.
amazing life. And I was just like, I don't know what to do. And so I said, like, I'm giving up my job. Like, we'll find somebody to fill in for me, so I'll stay on for the next week or something. And I was like, I'm never doing sound again. I could have just said, I'm grieving. I need some time off. Like, maybe I'll join you for the summer leg.
Right. Yeah.
I said, I'm never doing sound again.
Wow.
And I gave up my job. And I'm just realizing that this is the question about the joyologist. What happened was I spent a year grieving, healing, doing all sorts of like, how can I help people support me? But it really was a lot of just me like grieving and
Yeah.
letting myself like be myself. And even though I thought I had been myself for my entire life, like,
Right. You were doing this thing that you loved. Like you had succeeded. You were living the life.
yeah, and I like fought for it. There were very few women doing it. Um, what happened was I decided what was easiest for me was to take this thing that I wanted to do to change people's lives back to the world I knew. So
Mm,
I created a new role for myself on tour to take care of artists. And during
yeah.
that time, I had gotten certified as a yoga instructor. I started like doing like raw cooking and like, like really different things like with that year off. And so I was like, I'm going to take this back on the tour because I know how hard it is to be on tour. And these people who have it at all, I thought I was living my biggest dream. They really are living their biggest dreams. They're singing their
Yeah.
own songs around the world, have private jets, have, even had loving, supportive family and partners. Like it wasn't even like, oh man, their lives are really toxic. Of course
Right.
they're miserable. So even these people that really like had it all, still a lot of days, didn't look happy.
Yeah.
Were, like in doubts and fears. Were like overworked, but didn't know how to say no to people. Like
Yes.
so many things. And so I was like, and nobody like talks to, everybody's like walking around on tiptoes, with the person in charge wherever, whether they're a huge artist or like the boss, right? Like people are rarely like, hey, what's your deal?
Yeah.
Can we talk about this?
Right.
So I made up this job and I didn't have a title for it. And I didn't know how I was going to get out on the road doing this. And so the same artist who I had been working for, his production manager, who I'd worked with for years as a sound engineer, was like, we really miss you out on the road. We know that you said you're never going to do sound again. We need a production assistant on this tour.
Mm.
Would you be open to doing that? Because it was sort of like they were asking me, like, would you want to just be a production assistant? Which production assistant is a such valued position, but like, yeah, it was kind of a step down
Yeah.
for being the monitor engineer responsible for what the artist heard. And I said, yes, but this is what I'm going to do. I've created this new role for myself on tour. So I'm going to come out as a production assistant. I will do all those duties, but I'm going to also start doing these other things. And with the hopes that it turns into a full-time position and you'll hire another production assistant. And he sort of rolled his eyes at me, was like, okay, sure.
Mhm.
Because also they knew me. As a sound engineer, I toured with a juicer. I had gluten-free meals because I have fibromyalgia. I had a special rider. I would do yoga off the bus.
Yep.
Like I was myself that
Yeah.
whole
You
time
were the
as the
yoga
rock and roll
person.
sound engineer. So they're like, okay, sure, Tricia, whatever. Like, awesome. We're excited to have you on the road. Within a week of being on tour, Jason Mraz was like, I don't know what Tricia is doing, but I want her to do that full time. And
Yes.
said person who had hired me for that was like, okay, so Tricia's the joyologist. And that
Oh,
is where the title came from.
I love that.
Like
I
my
love
short
that it gives
story. No, I'm just kidding.
it's such but there is so much backstory to it, right? Because you have to go through, and this has been a theme on this show for sure, is like, this isn't about, "Let's just think positive." And I was just talking to my mom about this the other night, and she's a psychologist. She's like, "Positive thinking was never about just pretend like hard things aren't there. It was about, let me look at them. Let me like bring it front and center." And sometimes we need time to do that. Sometimes we need a little space to do that, but actually looking at what's real and then finding the way through. Right. And that's what I hear you doing is like, oh shit, I lost my dad. He fell and got a head injury. This random, like, of all the anxieties and fears and things that we're afraid of and all the ways we might worry about what might happen, I doubt that growing up, were like, I'm really afraid that this is going to happen to my dad ever. Right. And I think that's always one sidebar. Interesting thing about anxiety is we have all these fears, and it's like not the ones that we think of that end up happening most of the time. But you have this experience and then you look at it, right? And you go, okay, well, what am I going to do from here? And then the other piece that I love is you sort of trusted this unknown what's next. Okay, well, let me do yoga training and let me keep being me, and let me see how the me that's a sound engineer can fit into this world of health and wellness and bringing joy and sustainability and some level of contentment, because it's so crazy to hear. I mean, I think we all project, we see people out there in the limelight or at the Grammys or getting these awards and having albums and videos, and we just think, wow, they're done, they finished, like they're just happy, check, right? And they might be really grateful, but they still have hard days, and they still have the worries and the doubts and the fears, and people need people. We need someone. We can't just figure that out on our own. We have to have a culture and people around us who are going to go, hey, how are you doing today? Like, let's talk through this, or let's think about how you're thinking and why that might be the case and what we can do about it.
Yeah, and also like, hey, you're really acting like a jerk lately. Would you like to talk about what's going on?
Yeah, and I think sometimes
Because
people
then everybody's walking around like, I don't know, so and so's in a bad mood, and then everybody's off. Like,
right, and people who are in these larger positions, I think especially in entertainment, it's not my world, but like I can see how those people then people just withdraw and walk on eggshells. They're like, oh, I don't want to mess with the talent. It's like the talent's already messed with. you gotta have a conversation to unmess, right? Or to work through whatever that truth is. And people sort of withdraw or avoid or walk on eggshells and tiptoe. And that doesn't really do much, A, to support the person, or B, to resolve the situation and get the whole group, the whole culture back in rhythm.
yeah. So yeah. So the title stuck as Joyologist, and then I toured with artists doing that role, and then it was like, oh, I was running Twitter account, like and things like that. So it just sort of happened, like, oh, people like, oh, what I'm saying or this thing, maybe I'll lead an online workshop. What is that like? Like people do that, and that was like in 2010 or 20,
Yeah.
like, so like, yeah, a long time ago. I was like, oh, what are these people? And just sort of doing like that. So it just sort of naturally progressed into different things. And myself always struggled with the title Joyologist, and I still can sometimes be like that, because I make up that when people hear Joyologist, they think of like hippie fairy flying
Right.
around and like only positive. And so that I often have thought like, oh, do I not use Joyologist anymore? Um, Even like on my book, because for so
Mhm.
long I didn't use my name. I just last year like started using my name. Like
Yeah.
as like my social media and stuff, because I had a book coming out. But I was like, oh, I'll put your Joyologist on the book title too, because people only might know me that. But I'm like, oh, now that I'm using my name, do I need that? Or people can be like, your Joyologist, what's that? Like, again, that I'm afraid people think it means too happy, light, this.
Fluffy.
Really, it is like the whole thing from like that moment of my dad dying, of like, we don't know
Yeah.
what's going to happen tomorrow. And like hard,
Yeah.
bad things are happening. I'm living through a lot of grief right now, but like, yeah, like, but we can claim some joy every day, that we are
What I
worthy of
love
that, even when like going through hard times, or even when looks like the world is so messed up. Like, how can it's not like, how can I see the good in that? How can I see the good in
Yeah.
this shitty thing? Oh, am I allowed to cuss?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
I've been holding myself back so far, and I'm like, oh no, it's
Oh, please, bring them all. Bring the F-bombs. It's in the title of your book,
but
isn't it?
it's like,
Let's
not
just
how can
say
I
it.
find the good in the shitty thing that's happening to me or that's
Yeah.
happening in the world, but like, wow, that shitty thing is happening. But also like, how can I like make space for myself to experience some joy? And if that feels too far away, well, how can I at least nurture myself in this
Yes.
time?
Yes, and know that it's possible. What I love about the Joyologist is there's that, like, I think of the sort of mixologist and how you're, like, mixing things together. There's this, like, kind of sciencey sound to it. Like, we're gonna bring some parts together and figure this out. And so it's yeah, I can see how you would think, "Oh, well, maybe people think I'm just focusing on the positive," but that's definitely not the case, right? Your whole journey leading up to this is, "Let me experience this grief, this sadness. Let me crawl on the ground at my dad's funeral and feel this and feel the impact, and not numb or avoid or drown it out, but feel the impact of, holy shit, I have this one life to live. We all have this one life to live. And who knows what's on the other side of that. But I'm going to get to that business of living."
Yeah. And also in that is, I find that sometimes people are so like looking like forward, like we're working on some goal, right? Which it's amazing
Mhm.
to have goals and projects. Like I have a book coming out that I've been working on for years, and it's like it's so great to be like making that progress in that. But so often I feel we're wired to be like, I'll feel enough, happy, fulfilled, successful when my
Yeah.
book is out, when I have that dream job, when this project is complete. And so we are delaying our feelings of joy, of fulfillment, of success, or being enough until once this is done. But usually, no, we like, don't settle in it. It's just like, then, okay, well, now what's the next thing? And so that's too like, how can you like enjoy your life
Yeah.
in the now while still working on those things that you're working on?
Totally. And how
Whether
can
it's
we
healing trauma or, like writing a book or becoming this dream job that you have or whatever it is, like also enjoy your current life. So how can you claim some joy in feeling
right.
that you're enough and worthy and successful right now as you are, even though you haven't accomplished those things?
Chris Carr and I were talking about this in terms of like being in any way or like type A oriented where you want to like check things off and get things done. And I think our, at least American culture is really has an emphasis in that direction. And it does us a disservice because we're always waiting for an endpoint when things are all resolved. And that's just not life. Right. And we'll sort of attach it to external things. And I catch myself doing this still, where you attach it to some external thing. Well, when that thing happens, then I'll feel fulfilled rather than it being this journey and this unfolding of, and I don't even want to say chasing the joy, but like feeling into what feels good to me now, what's inspiring me now, what has energy, what has life, because those are the things like that's the juice of it, right? I used to run, I haven't since COVID really much, but I used to run ultra marathons and people would be like, oh, that's crazy. That's intense. That's so hard. And I'd be like, I just love spending time outside all day. And honestly, I love the trajectory from I just signed up for this really long race. Oh my God, I don't know if I can do it, to the inspiration that comes. Okay, I'm going to go running this weekend. Okay, I'm going to go out with some friends. Okay, I'm going to try to keep up here. Okay, I'm going to take it slow over there. And then it's almost like the event doesn't matter so much,
Mm.
right? You're like, oh, and I would show up, and I think I have a different mentality than a lot of people do in that, because it is still for a lot of people a race and they're going for a time, and I never really felt that way. But I would just show up at the start line like, this is really cool. Wow, maybe I can do this. Maybe I won't, maybe I'll bop out at mile 48 and be sad about it. But like even that would be longer than I've run before today. So cool, and I just show up and be like, okay, let's explore this new thing. And I've never been on these trails before. And I think when we have that experience, like for me, I remember being on the trails and like singing, like singing Sarah Bareilles songs and like people being like, who's this girl singing stuff? And like, people would think like, oh, you're just like this Pollyanna, like you're not serious about it. But I had so much fun and enjoyed it so much. And I would see people suffering like, oh, I sprained my knee, but I'm going to finish. And I'm like, why? Like, really,
They
why?
feel like
We could
they
sit down and have a
should.
conversation, but I'm not working right now, so I'm gonna let the people at the aid station be your counselor, and I'm gonna keep going because 'cause I'm on the weekend and I need some nature. So
But
it's just
you're
really
like
interesting.
flipping through your business cards.
I know, I'm like, "No, not right now." I know, right? I could just, like, advertise, be in the swag bag, like, "Now
Give
that
you,
you
yeah.
just finished your race, give me a call."
Did you push
Yeah.
yourself even though you're miserable? You may want to look at it.
Yeah, but I think we do have this way of, our minds we know are oriented to problems. We want to be able to predict them. We want to be able to solve them. We want to be able to solve them before they happen. It's great to be in a preventative state or angle, but so much of the time we're preventing or we're creating problems in our head, or we're problem solving things that never happen. And so it sounds like part of what you do is really help people work with their mindset or work with the way they're relating to themselves in their lives. Like what are some common themes that come up when you're coaching people?
I feel like so much is related to self-worth
Mm,
and people just not allowing themselves to be who they are. And
yeah.
and I feel like most of that is related to the shoulds, which is what my first book is, F the shoulds, do the once. And that is, by the way, when my father passed away and oh god, were you about to say something?
I was gonna say you can say it. Fuck the shoulds, do the wants. You can say it.
Oh, I left fuck off the title. I made it
Oh,
F to make it a
okay. That's an
little more
intentional.
okay
Right,
to
we
be out in the
respect that.
world. Like, I'm hoping to see it on Target and caps. We'll see. Like,
Okay. Yeah,
just
yeah.
a little
That
bit
makes
more
sense.
aggressive. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
But yes,
Reach a
the
wider audience.
original mantra from my product line, and it was "fuck the shoulds." Um, But so, back in Australia when I'm like lost from my dad dying and just like knowing uh I needed to stop and I didn't know at some point too, this like message got implanted in my head, like, you are done with the shoulds. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about because like I don't live a life of shoulds. Like I have done things my own way like my whole life. So I don't know what you're talking about. But I just had this like thing within that I was like, no more shoulds. Um, and I decided to stick to that so much that I would not let myself use the word.
Mm.
So I'm back in California and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I just quit my dream job and I was actually super scared. I was like, maybe that was a bad idea. I don't know. But then I was like, some part of me knew that it was done because you said forever. And you could have said, I'll be back in a couple weeks.
Right.
So I wouldn't let the word come out of my mouth. And it was shocking to me how much I naturally wanted to use the word, that it was just by default. Hey, what should we do today? What should I eat? Should I go to the
Yes.
farmer's market today? Should I do yoga at 10 or noon? Like all of these things that seem pretty like, yeah, who cares? That's not a big deal. But I was so committed that I wouldn't let myself use the word should. But so I would be like, what should,
Mm.
even in conversation, like I was so committed. And so I would be like, what do I say? I don't
Yeah.
understand. And I tried some different things on. And what I ended up being my natural default was want. And it shifted everything so much because I was immediately then actually coming back to myself and pausing to consider myself. And it started to be this like natural wake up that I became so mindful of what I was saying, what I was thinking, and then therefore what I was believing about
Yeah.
myself from just the should because it came up so much. And so now this was like, that was 2008. Uh, this should still come up for me daily. And I don't even use the word, but it's just the feeling because it's like
Mhm.
just so ingrained in us that we are looking outside of ourselves for
Yes.
the answers.
Yes.
And that's okay. Like, I love to research, I love to get advice, I love to get feedback. But seeing, like, oh, and what about me? What is my opinion? What feels best for me right now in this moment?
Yeah.
Not, well, I should do that because that was a dream of mine. Or, so that's too that sometimes it's like we're shooting on ourselves because it's like even, another past version of ourselves said that we or wanted that or something. So I was
Yeah.
able to get clear in the moment of what do I want? And then even question like, well, why do I feel like I want to do that? And so for me, this is like I don't you might be like, are you actually answering my question of what people struggle with? But so much I do
Yeah.
feel like
They should all
when
over themselves.
yeah, people should all over themselves. And by tuning into that, I'm constantly getting clear with myself. That's the subtitle of the book is get clear on who you are, what you want, and why you want it. And this isn't like some big dream want. Like, sure, this book will help you figure out like your dream want in life, but this is a moment to moment thing. Who you are
Yeah.
in this moment. What do you want in this moment? Why do you want it in this moment? Like, why are you feeling that way? And so
Mhm.
often I'm covering up my own feelings of not being enough.
Yeah.
As much self-love work I've done, self-worth like work, like I also almost ended my life when I was 15 and I lived my life a different way from that point on, which is another reason that I was like, I don't should like no. Like
Yeah.
I told my parents to F off when I was 15 and I was doing things in my life because I could see they weren't happy. So why would I listen to them and do
Yeah.
things their way? Like at 15 too, I had this awakening of like so many people are miserable. So I'm just
Yes.
going to do what I want. So that's why when I noticed the should thing, I was like, I don't understand why I'm telling myself no shoulds. Like it's me I'm talking to.
Another layer, right? It's like, okay, you
And
claim it at 15 and then years later you reclaim it.
and now, but it just in this one thing like gives me this daily awareness. Cause again, you're a you've done so much work. It's like it's not gonna go away. One day you magically figure it all out and you never struggle with not
Right?
feeling enough ever
I feel
again.
like there's a button
You
for that.
never have a
Yeah.
doubt. You never have a fear. You never feel shame. You have done all the work. Congratulations. Welcome to like enlightenment or wholeness or whatever. No, it's a moment to moment glimpse.
Yeah.
And so that it's like, so it gives me this constant looking at, oh, hey, this is me telling myself I'm not enough again. Oh, this is me in comparison mode again. Oh,
Yeah.
and so yeah, so a lot of my clients, I feel like no matter what it is, there's always self-worth. And it's because we're often projecting ourselves into what we should be doing, what other
Mhm.
people think we should do. Body image is such a effed up thing,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm still like every day I'm just like, I can't wait for the day that my default is not telling my body, oh no, that doesn't look flattering enough, so you can't wear that. Who cares?
Right.
I love it. Like I love it, mind. Like I have to like tell myself to F off constantly because I'm
Yeah.
so set up to judge myself.
Yeah. I think about like looking, I don't know if you've ever had this experience of looking at a picture of yourself and feeling immediately critical of it. I think a lot of people have that experience. And it's so interesting that over years, and at least it goes in this direction, but I've noticed like I'll see pictures of myself in high school when I was so, worried about what I look like, or I'd see, and oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. And then I'm like, your parents or whoever, your friends are like, you look great. And you're like, you're lying. You're lying because you love me. And then years later, you go back and you're like, what was I tripping off? Like, what did I even see? I can't even see it now. Like, what? And that's that sort of dysmorphia, right? Where we don't even see ourselves clearly. And so with the shoulds and with the self-worth, it's like, can we actually even start to see ourselves with positive regard, with worth, with love, with care, without this lens of criticism and without this lens of external shoulds. I mean, you talk about body image, which makes me think of food, which is such a big thing in the health and wellness culture, and like how much we should on ourselves about around food and around what to eat. And I think about, stories I've heard. There's some journalist who wrote about this in a really funny way, but like, I think there was like a poem or something. It was called I should have ordered the scampi where like somebody it was like, oh, I think he was talking about his wife. He's like, my wife's life story is going to be entitled I should have ordered the scampi. Where it's just like you're like on the menu like, oh, I should have this or I should have that, rather than just like what stands out, what do I want? Done, moving on. Like that's lunch. So we can get in our heads so much about what we look like or how we're perceived or what we should do, and those trajectories can really take us away from who I am, what I want. And sometimes I think why I want it, and other times like doesn't matter. This is who I am, this is what I want, right? Like doesn't need an explanation. For the bigger things, I think why I want it is really compelling. But if you just want lasagna for lunch, like that's enough, right?
Yeah, totally. And there are parts when I'm like working through different things and I'm like, if you don't know the why, please don't get stuck on it. Like ask the why on this, whatever. But like, yeah, sometimes you can go into tailspin, like, I don't know. What is the why? Like, yeah, because you want it is enough. Or like because it brings
Just
you
want
joy
it.
is enough. Like what
So how would you say, like, what kind of healing are people looking for then? Would you call it just healing around self-worth, or do you feel like there's a common core wound people are working with? Does that apply here?
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I think there's, the self-worth struggle for sure, and people just being able to like own who they are and own their own choices. Like that's the thing too. Most people, again, like I'm used to people sort of like shrugging me off when I would talk about the shoulds because I've been talking about this for over 10 years, even though I just now haven't. I'm like, now look, I wrote an entire book about how bad it messes you up. People, will you listen to me? But like that we are so like murky about how we
Mhm.
actually feel and what we actually think and believe about ourselves because of all the shoulds that are constantly coming at us. So it's
Yeah.
like giving them space to like actually, yeah, like dig in and accept themselves and even look at considering what their wants are for the first time in their life. Because so often, too, especially women can be this defaulted of what's expected of me or like, wanting to take care of others. And like, what is that? And then, yeah, I mean, too, definitely with the Joyologist, there is yeah, just enjoying your life. It's like this very simple thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like, hi, can you try to enjoy your life more today?
Mhm.
Like the very simplest
That's like that
method.
should be
And
the alarm in the morning. Good
so
morning.
small, but it's like people really struggle to actually enjoy your life. And in the book, and I think even in you know, about like the book sales page or whatever, it's like to live your most alive and aligned life. Like that's what the point of the book is.
Yeah.
And when I hired an amazing team to do the book landing page, and they like I was sending them copy, they were like, "Can we change this to like, when you read the like you'll, get your dream life or something?" And I said, "No.
No.
Absolutely not. I am not going to sell this book because people think they're going to read it and get their dream life."
Right. That's
Like
not
that
the
is the
point.
point. That the
Yeah.
entire book I am being straight up real. These are things you're going to have to struggle with your entire life. And in each moment, you're going to be getting clear with yourself, because it brings you back to like the truth, the now, so that you can be aligned with yourself and alive, present in your life. That doesn't mean you're going to feel joy in every moment of the day.
So how do you define joy or a joyful life? Like how would people, I mean, I don't want to be in the mindset of like, how do you know you got there? But how would you describe that to someone who maybe is in this place of really suffering or feeling a lot of fear and doubt and insecurity all the time and feeling stuck in it and wanting, like if you're coaching someone out on tour or elsewhere, how would you define joy to them?
It's a good question. And it seems like it would have a very simple answer.
Right?
you know, immediately when I think of joy, I think of bliss, which is not necessarily like great. So it feels like bliss, but it also feels like you're just so present. You're in the moment. It's like
Yeah.
imagining like when a song comes on and you just start singing it out loud and you don't even realize it, or you're dancing, like when you're letting yourself like be free and be in something. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. So like a 30 seconds of you being in like that song or whatever, like is impactful to your life. And I think again that's the thing. People think, oh, if I'm trying to be joyful or live a joyful life, then it goes to projecting this image of you are in this like joyous high floating above life state at all times. And that so often in life we do hold ourselves back because we make everything seem too big and too hard. And so even experiencing joy, it can feel so outside of us where it's like, put on a song you like and just
Yeah.
allow yourself to be in it.
Yeah. It stands out to me as you're talking. I'm thinking about people on tour who have achieved this dream. You were talking about put on a song and music, and people who are performing at that level, they love music. Like I'm thinking about Sarah Bareilles, is just how I found out about you, and Jason Mraz, who you mentioned earlier, who have this beautiful, inspiring music, and it's, I think, their soul's calling to be a musician, and then they can do that thing and be out on stage and be appreciated and celebrated, and still, right? And still, that doesn't necessarily scratch the itch or make them feel whole and complete or joyous all the time. And so, I mean, I think that's a huge learning for all of us, just to know a lot of this is just being a human being. Like, you're going to have different feelings. You're never going to be in this state of bliss. And even for that person who's getting off the stage and feeling a certain kind of way, or, when you do what you love for a business, there's these other layers to it. It can get more complicated. So even for that person, well, how does it make a difference if your dressing room is arranged differently? How does it make a difference if you're saying a certain thing to yourself? And I know that was some of the things that you did, right? Was like to
Mhm.
support people in feeling a connection to their own sense of joy, right? Maybe it's you just really love yellow tulips and you come in and those are in your room, and that sets a tone in a different way. Or maybe it's connecting with someone you love before or after you go out. I don't know, but it seems like there are these really seemingly small things that we think of the big things. We think, oh, when I'm a Grammy award winning artist, that's when I'll feel bliss all the time. And a lot of people, even Olympians, talk about going out and like the crash after experiences like that, like the dopamine crash or whatever it is. Like I got the gold medal, and like, why do I feel like crap a few days later? So that's where I feel like these things are so essential, because we can focus so much on the big accomplishments and forget how important the mind, I want to say mindful, but like the moment to moment presence and the moment to moment choices are, right? Like, I'm going to put on a song I love. I'm going to, stare at this flower I love. I'm going to whatever to connect with myself and to connect with what I'm really wanting and needing right now.
Yeah, totally. It's like, yeah, we put it in like, I will be joyful once this happens. But it's like, no, like every day, like, what are the small things? Like, I think it's great. And I often in my group coaching programs and one on one, like, it's always that it's like, yeah, you like get a document in your phone of like, what are things that bring you joy to like remind you? It's like, oh, this is my favorite song, or I love doing this. It's, like, yeah, walking outside and looking like, what are things that can up your joy levels on
Mhm.
a daily basis, and also like what things feel nurturing to me, because sometimes they can be an overlap and sometimes it's different. Because again, I'm not like, yeah, if you're having a really hard time and sad time, you might want to go to one of those joyful things. Oh, like listening to comedy. I love things that make me laugh. I forget all the time. I used to
Yeah.
listen to like Pandora comedy stations all the time. Now I always forget those exist. I'm like, what? I love funny things. Whoops, I forgot.
Yep.
It's like just, oh, a minute of laughing. Like, oh, right,
Yeah.
right, right. It doesn't change or take the things away. It just like gives you this sort of like, oh, other feelings are possible, but sometimes you can't, you're not going to go to that laughy thing. Well, what nurtures me? Oh, maybe it's, this favorite tea. Maybe, and I also, again, I think there's so much shame in like food being something that brings you joy and nurture you because of all of the unfortunate, like
Yeah.
diet culture and even wellness, like
Yeah.
purityness, where it's like, I don't think there's shame in like, oh, let me go buy my favorite chocolate because I'm having a bad day. But instead of feeling like I shouldn't be eating this or I shouldn't have eaten that or that was the wrong wellness thing to do, be like, I love myself so much. I went and bought myself my favorite chocolate and I
Yeah.
am savoring it. So that
Yeah.
too, I feel like the feelings we have around things are more
Yeah.
toxic than the thing itself.
Yeah, and that happens a lot of times in a lot of ways. And I think what you're speaking to with the nurturing is really important too, because you talked about grief. I've experienced grief. A lot of people out there are going through it right now, post pandemic, and just in general. Like this is a real part of life that we don't talk about. I think we don't talk about enough in Western culture, and we don't really have ways to include it in how we're thinking while we're alive. We kind of like wait for death to come to have thoughts and experiences around it. But nurturing, and I think of it a lot in terms of caring, like what do I need right now, and how can I care for myself right now? How can I care for this feeling? How can I care even for someone I'm upset with, or people in my life? So in those moments of, okay, joy feels far away. It might not even feel like it really serves me right now because I'm kind of processing something, I'm moving through something, reaching for what feels nurturing, what feels supportive, and going with that. I'm curious if there's anything else you would say to people who maybe really recently lost someone or who are feeling like, oh, joy feels so far away. What's a micro step I can take in that direction? Or what are some practices you might recommend?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is to allow yourself to feel your feelings and to like know that grief is universal, yet different for all of us. I
Right.
also think it's really
Yeah.
unpredictable. Like you can think you've gotten through this, or I guess I'm not, it's like you're not shooting yourself on how you're grieving. Oh, this person
Yeah.
did this, or this person quit her life. Do I have to do that too? Or like, like to just like really be
Right.
like loving and compassionate with yourself. Um, I do think too, I think grief can be lonely, even if, you're grieving with your family or something, because we all do it one way. And people, I don't think we have enough grief resources. And even me, who's gone through several types of grief, well, everyone has, but even with my experiences of really owning it, I can still struggle myself with supporting people going through, like, and wanting to be
Sure.
like, oh, how can I help? Like people try to be helpful and loving, but to you, it might not show like they don't understand like that. So it's like trying to remember that people do love you and support you, and they just they don't know how to process your grief
Yeah.
or like, or express it. And even that's something like, even me who's gone through it, I sometimes find myself like, oh, whoops, I did the let me know if you need anything thing. And they're not going to know because they don't want to, they can't reach out and ask. They're too much in their grief. Right.
Yeah.
Just drop something off. Like, so it's just like people in your life don't understand. That doesn't mean you like need to write them off, first of all.
Right. Right.
um, yeah, allowing yourself to grieve and also like allowing yourself to hold space for multiple emotions at once. Where
Mm.
I do know that sometimes people can be like, how dare I feel joy or, like, do something that serves me when this miserable thing just happened, or this, like whatever it is that you're grieving, that
Mhm.
sometimes they don't even allow themselves to have any capacity for joy, or they feel bad if they do something to nurture themselves. Like it's like feels as if like I need to be in punishing myself mode
Mm,
because I'm grieving. And
right.
that, like, I just don't think that that's helpful at all.
It's occurring to me as you're talking too that owning what you want is an important piece. I was thinking of a client I saw recently who was having a hard time, and a friend reached out and said, "Is there anything I can do?" And rather than sort of roll with, how she would normally respond to that, she said, "Yes, if we had a regular monthly friend date on the calendar, that would really help me." Right? And so sometimes it's a matter of, that whole let me know if you need anything, the person doesn't know what they need. And sometimes it's also like this permission, or, that word is, permission from who, but like this embracing of expressing what we want without, and sometimes saying why and sometimes not. Like it would be really helpful for us to have a friend date once a month. I would really love it if you would bring me my favorite lasagna. And I feel like sometimes we just have these little blocks to that, like we're gonna seem entitled, or we're gonna seem, I
Because
don't
they
know,
don't
bossy
really
or
care. They're
whatever.
just trying to be nice. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, they don't really wanna do it, right? Or we can have all these mental, kind of like static in the way of just that connection of this person wants to help, doesn't know what to do. Can you watch my kids for 5 minutes? I really need a nap. Whatever that thing is. And so sometimes I feel like there is that disconnect in grief where people are there and wanna help, don't know what to do, and people don't know what they need, which is normal in grief, and or don't want to, or feel like it's okay or socially acceptable to just be direct and say, "Can you leave me alone for a week?" Like, I've gotten that text 10 times today and I just don't, whatever it is, right? Just to be able to be honest and still maintain the relationship. I feel like we can kinda get tiptoey around that.
there is a lot of hard time with people like actually allowing themselves to explore what they want and then voicing that. And that you're right, like you might actually know what you want. So allowing yourself to say it, because also too to think like that person is actually asking you that because they actually want to help. And like, yeah, but it can seem like, oh, they're just being nice or that. Like I had a friend going through something recently and there was this constantly, and I just kept thinking, oh, she's just self-sustained and so she's fine. So I keep asking her, hey, do you want me to stop by or this? Oh no, I'm okay. Blah, blah, blah. And then like months went by and there was a big like medical like issue. And I didn't realize how bad off she was because she wasn't expressing it. And like,
Right.
really, I was like, ah, I wish I had just been like, I'm bringing you, I'm stopping by. Is
Yeah.
that okay? Yes or no? Like, you know what I mean? Because then what had happened after the big medical thing, like, again, this is like health issues, but also similar to grief. Then she was like, oh, yes, thank you. Like, because it was sort of like when I started to be more authoritative about, I'm bringing you lunch tomorrow. You want it from this place or this place?
Yeah.
Like, that it was like, wow, but like not, she wasn't voicing it in those other times.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, being able to say, like, yeah, this is what I want. And it's okay that you're asking for it. And like, these people actually want to take care of you and they want to be there for you. So allow yourself to ask for that.
Yeah. And there's this like there's an opportunity for connection in there, and then it can just fall from one side or the other, or through that lens it can end up feeling disconnected when there's a real desire, you know, oftentimes on both sides for there to be a point of connection. And I feel like, yeah, we need our alone time and all that too, but connection can be such a deep source of support and healing and, feeling cared for. So, yeah, I feel like owning what it is that you want can help even in those times. So you might not feel super joyful, or you might just have little moments of reprieve through humor or whatever it is, but there's still that element of connecting with who you are, how you are, day to day, moment to moment, and being really intentional and clear of what is the next thing or action or, behavior or whatever it is that brings me some sort of relief or joy or nurturing, right? And asking for that, like taking steps in that direction, being clear about it.
And that's the thing too, like, it's just paying attention in our lives to what does make us come more alive, what does like light us up and fulfill us and feel good, whether it's people, restaurants, places, things, like to pay attention to that in your daily life. And again, like maybe make logs of it, because that will help
Mhm.
you then if you are going through a challenging time, whether it's yourself, like, oh right, I don't like, what can I do? Oh right, I'm gonna do this thing, it makes me fun. Or when people are asking you for requests, and be like, oh yeah, can you bring me my favorite baked goods from Just What I Needed? You know what I mean? Like, once we're starting to get more in tuned with what do I want? What makes me come alive? Then you have resources for the future when you are in this like down place of like,
Mm.
ah, joy, what's that?
Yeah. Yeah, and I feel like so much of this is, and I know you've practiced yoga, like this mindful attention of the present moment, right? Like, oh, this is what's happening. This is how I feel. But I know with yoga and mindfulness practices, they become a lifestyle, right? They sort of become this thing that's woven into your day so that you can actually connect with what you appreciate and what brings you joy when it's happening. Like I just noticed it's spring out here right now and there's these beautiful cherry blossoms and there's like the light pink one next to the bright pink one and I just am driving or walking my dogs or whatever and I look up and I'm just like wow. Like that is so amazing. How are we all not just stopping and staring at these two trees on a suburban sidewalk, right? Like, and it's not, DC in the spring or something where I think we do sort of travel from afar and go and see, but it's there and it's so beautiful. And I really feel that without some of these practices in my own life and without some of the similar work to what you're talking about, maybe in a different angle, like I don't know that, we could be in that really busy mind and just walk right by it. And it's like, those are the things that I think, you give it the end of life test, looking back, you're like, why didn't I appreciate those trees? Um, or I don't know, what was that? There was the movie about the comet hitting the earth. Did you watch that recently?
It doesn't sound like something I
I,
want. Oh,
I forgot the name.
I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about, because people, it's like everywhere, but I'm still like, yeah, I don't feel like I can get it.
Don't Look Up. It's
Yeah,
called
I was
Don't
like, I
Look
knew
Up.
that's what you're talking about. I was like, there's so many
I
great
didn't
actors, but I
wanna
was like, I
watch
don't
it.
know.
I didn't wanna watch it for a number of reasons. I ended up watching it, but you know what stuck with me about it was there's a line in there where I think it's Leonardo DiCaprio's character goes, "We really had it all, didn't we?"
Mm.
And I'm like, "Yes, we do." There's so much working. And I remember even as a kid being like, "It's so amazing how we have these green and red light systems and people follow them for the most part." Like, that impressed me. I remember growing up being like, "Wow,
Still
we
impresses me.
really worked it out." I mean, we can look at a whole bunch of other issues and know that we do not have it all figured out. But it really would impress me. Like we all agree on this pretty much, and we work with it, and that's actually pretty impressive. So like to
Yeah.
have these moments where we are attuned, at least in some way, even to small things. I mean, that's a huge thing, whether or not we stop at a green or red light. But to look at what is working or to see the things that do bring you joy and to kind of wrench our minds from the drama that comes with fearful and intense and violent things, which are very present. We don't avoid them, but we also don't want to get usurped by them. We don't want to become entrenched so that we're not even aware of beautiful cherry blossoms on a sunny day or whatever it is that for you brings you some of those feelings.
Yeah, and I love I've done a few times like on social media, done reels, and it's like I'm going on a wonder walk. And it
Yes.
is like, and it's usually on a, I only take them when I do not feel like taking a walk at all. Like
Yeah.
when I'm like, I'm just like not feeling good. I'm like, okay, go outside and go on a wonder walk, even if it's for 5 minutes. And it is just like walking around and looking, whoa, look at that. Oh wow, look at that. Like being present to what's around me. And of course it always like shifts, your mindset. But that thing too, that reminded me when you're talking about all that stuff. Like I have regular moments of that, of being in wonder and awe, and we'll be like driving and be like, how crazy that we could just like drive to wherever right now. Like how somebody like thought of this and like how much work it's been. I mean, it's like looking at anything in front of you, like somebody had this idea and then they like had somebody made it. And then it's like, and then realizing like all the steps that have to go into it. Like
Mhm.
how the transportation, the gas oils, the companies, like all the people that contributed to getting like this coaster. to me that somebody might
Yep.
have like hand designed. I don't know. Like, so getting into those moments of wonder and awe, I think are so beneficial. And they kind of, again, it's like maybe not joy, but it is. Like, I do think that the wonder and joy overlap. And again, when you mentioned the checklist or the to-do list, like, yeah, we're so focused on then. That's what I have, this daily connection journal, which I'll send you one, and it has these daily prompts. And on there, like, I have daily win joy spot,
Yeah.
which, because it's like so easy again to be like, oh, I didn't do this today, or I didn't do this, or blah, blah, blah. And there's all these things I want to do. So like noting like what was a little win, like
Yeah.
or what brought you joy. If you like, you can't, and it could be like, oh, my kid actually ate their lunch. Woo, like that's a win. Or like somebody left me a nice comment on my post. Like, like looking for the small things again, because I think we are just projected into big, endless, go, go, go. And also in the daily journal, it's like it says the last thing is like, what can I acknowledge myself for today? I
Yeah.
acknowledge myself for. So again, that can be like these things of wonder and awe. It's like, oh, I didn't do these things yet. But like, well, what did you do? And maybe it's a day where you got nothing done and you felt miserable. So you're like, what can I acknowledge myself? I acknowledge myself for taking care of myself. I acknowledge myself for, taking care of my friends and family. Because if maybe that's why you didn't get your things done. Like, where every day you can see, like, yeah, where can I find joy? Where did I find joy today? And if you look at that, I don't know. What can I do to bring myself joy now? Or what was a win? And then also, what can I acknowledge myself for, instead of, because we're just so used to beating ourselves up and feeling like the things we didn't do yet.
Mm-hmm. There's such, I think, a valuable reorientation here of focusing on, and in my last book, the last chapter is about cultivating joy. And you kind of go from learning about trauma, facing it, looking at it, moving through it, processing the grittier, more challenging emotions, finding moments of relief in there. I think some people who've had really gnarly, trauma, especially like complex developmental trauma as a kid, or like, you know, um, people who are like exploited as children or have ritual abuse histories, like this really gnarly stuff, feel like I can never get there. I'm not going to be happy or find joy, but this is such a different orientation to it. And right, it's not so much finding it, landing on it, getting it, as cultivating it, right? Like, I'm going to have this daily practice of, and I think what's so beautiful about it is so many of those people have been harmed, like really seriously harmed by other people. And a lot of the art that I see is like this harshness coming in, but it almost to me looks like the practices you're describing would look like gardening that, right? We use that analogy a lot with mindfulness. You're gardening your mind, but you're gardening like your body and your soul. And you're like, okay, what do you need over here? And okay, so you're sad and you want your favorite chocolate bar. Okay. And let's put this over here and let's nurture this over there. And oh, you need some water. Okay. So it's, a lot of the way that I think about things is through neglect and harm and care. And the neglect and the harm do have a really serious impact. And what's the flip of that, right? It's that we care for ourselves. And I just hear so much, I know self-care is a word that's used so much, but there's so much care for ourselves in the way that you're describing this, and so many different pathways and angles, and also so many important questions, right? Let me ask myself, what do I want right now? What do I need right now? And instead of pulling a should from the way you grew up or the way someone else treated you or the way certain societal structures place you, or, something you saw that wasn't helpful, you can pull it from within, right? And from this place of real respect for yourself. And, from there, even care and love for yourself. I'm wondering if there's like a mantra. I know you've had like, cards and things and mantras that people use. I wonder if there's one that stands out for you, for people who are maybe facing trauma, facing loss, facing grief, um, in the thick of hard things. What's something you might leave them with?
That's a good question. First, let me,
Go.
touch on a couple of things that you said, like, way out when you're talking about the joy, and, like, again, it's like we look like, yeah, a joyful life, like, that's the dream, but, yeah, that could look too hard or too big, and then I'm all about, like, what I often use is the term claiming joy. Like, so
Yeah.
it's like, how can I claim, and again, like, how can I claim some joy today? Or, like, yeah, that we're looking for joyful, to feel a moment even of joy, not like, how can I, like, make my joyful life? And that, yeah, thank you for what you were saying about my work, and that a lot of it is, like, it's a lot of self-compassion, and that
Yes.
really is what a lot of the book is. And even it's constantly like, oh, if you're gonna, you're gonna do these, you're gonna fall back in these patterns, instead of beating yourself up, like, have compassion for yourself. And it is a lot of asking yourself questions, and, like, the subtitle was going to be like getting curious about something, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah. And that is so, because we can't always control what comes into our minds, but we can question it. And that's what it's like, the training of the paying attention to the should word, and then the feeling for me has me questioning my thoughts constantly and my beliefs. And just to even be like, maybe this is what it's going to, I'm like, now I'm like forgetting what you asked me. But so one of my biggest turnarounds, and I already mentioned how, like, the struggle of enoughness, and even like with body image, can come up so much still, is that when I catch myself in those moments, I'm like, oh, what am I telling myself right now? I'm telling myself that I'm not enough because of this. I'm not worthy because of this. And my second, and then I ask myself, is that really what I want to believe?
Yeah.
So simply, like, is that what I want? So, like, sure, that might be something you actually believe because it's been so programmed into you, or
Yeah.
because of the past things that have happened to you. Is that what I want to believe?
Yeah.
And usually it's no. And then you can even ask yourself, what do I want to believe?
Yeah.
I'm worthy of my own love. I'm worthy
That's
of my own compassion. I'm worthy of being myself out in the world, no matter what my size is. I'm
yes.
worthy of wearing this outfit, even if it's not flattering, because it brings me joy. So I don't know what was I supposed to be giving you a
Well,
mantra?
the question was a mantra, and I think
Okay.
that's a great one. What do I want to believe right now? And that actually leads me to something else I wanted to ask earlier. A lot of people here on this podcast and other places talk about with losing someone feeling like a spiritual experience. And I'm curious if you ever had any spiritual experiences, or if you, because I feel like this conversation applies to that. I was talking with Chris about she lost her dad on February 11th. Valentine's Day was the day she got diagnosed with cancer. Her dad would always come and check in on her and say, like, hey, how's my Valentine? And then so the first year, it's like 3 days later, right, that she has this big anniversary day of the day she got diagnosed with cancer, and she's looking for, she's with her mom, and her dad's not there, and they go for a walk on the beach, and they find 3 roses, like, sticking up in the sand, and her dad used to always bring flowers for them for Valentine's Day. And so there's just this moment of, what do I wanna what do I want, what do I need right now in terms of my own faith or spiritual beliefs? Like, I actually really want and need to believe that this is meaningful, and that this is a place where I can feel a connection with my father. And at least from her perspective, and I know people have such varying degrees of experience with this all across the board, but there's this element of finding a place to keep that connection alive, keep that love alive. And there is a little leap of faith and, like, what do I want to believe versus what is the ultimate truth? Because as far as I know, I haven't found anyone who, has the fully proven map of the universe and what happens when people die. And I'm happy to interview folks on the podcast who have that and contrast different opinions, but there's no, like, resolute, everyone agrees this is how it is. So I'm just curious if that applies for you, if you've seen those spiritual experiences for yourself, or if that wanting applies there, or if you've coached people experiencing that type of stuff.
Like, are you meaning, so like a spiritual experience, like feeling like this connection with him after he's gone, or some sort of like thing, like, yeah, where hers was very like, oh, a 3 roses or something like that?
Yeah, did you feel any connection with your dad after he passed, or did it feel more of like, this is more shifting towards me in my life now?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's been moments over the years, and I mean, I feel like I haven't been a religious person but a very spiritual person. Again, like from even, the experience of when I was 15 and I chose to live. And that
Yeah.
also has been a mantra going forward. Like I chose to live, and that is tied to the Joyologist. And again, like what I do every day. It's like today might be my best day, and like everything seems like it's against me. And I am alive, so I choose to be alive. So it's not again like seeing the best, but like, hey, I'm alive here on this earth and being present to my life. Um, so yeah, I definitely felt, like guided and sort of like, I don't think I would have given up my life and sort of, like taken that trust in figuring out, like believing and making up a job, you
Yeah.
know, like instead
There's a lot of
and
faith
putting
in that,
myself into
right?
the world continuously still, like later, if I wouldn't
Yeah.
have felt this connection to his spirit and like, his life. And I don't remember any moments like that, but like I remember at one point having a dream where he was in it, and it was like it felt like we were even like at a like funeral or something again, or like a party afterwards, but it was somewhere I didn't know, or something like that. But his family, and all of a sudden I like see my dad.
Mhm.
And I there were several times I would like see him, but then he like wouldn't talk to me or disappear, something like that. And I like at this time went up to him and I was like, Dad? And he talked to me, and like I remember asking him about and like, where are you? And he was like, I'm really cold.
Oh.
And he died of hypothermia. And like we
Oh,
had this conversation in my dream, and I don't remember all of it, but I remember that waking up and sort of like,
wow.
like having this conversation with him where it felt very much like I feel like I just had a conversation with
Yeah,
my dad wherever his soul is. And that
right.
there was more like information that he gave me or like something. And I don't remember all of it. I just really remember it like the like I'm really cold right now, or I remember being really cold, or like like him, like whatever. And then like there was like it gave me some sort of like closure.
Yeah.
And then when my first daughter was a baby, I remember there was something weird going on with her monitor, or like she was talking where it felt like I felt like my dad visited her several
Wow.
times, to even to the point that I was like, if I show her a picture of my dad, will she be like, oh, like recognize him, even though she doesn't, he died way before she was born, so she doesn't know him. But there were several moments that happened that I was like, I feel like and there was even like something was going on, like he was messing with him. And I remember I had to have a conversation, like I had a conversation with my dad's spirit, like, Dad, I love you. And I'm so glad that you're here and you're visiting Zia. But you gotta stop that because it's really freaking me out. Like, it was like there was some, like, noise happening or something. Like, there was something
Yeah,
that was really, like, freaking me out, and, like, I don't know what I can't remember it exactly now to, like, why I thought, like and it happened, like, several nights in a row or, like, and after I had that conversation, it never happened again.
that's really interesting. You're like, "Love you, stop it.
I'm
You're
really, yeah, I
freaking
was
me
like, "I
out."
love you. I think you're visiting Zia, and I love that you're spending time with her, and I want you to keep doing that, but I know you're here, so, like, you don't like, that noise thing or, like, whatever, like, can
You don't have
you
to do
stop
the thing
that?"
with the monitor anymore, it's super
Like, can you
creepy.
it never happened after that.
I love that. And I asked this question just because I feel like one theme that's sort of emerging through this podcast is, we're talking about healing, so we talk about painful moments, we talk about grief and loss, we talk about also just these things that I think as a general culture, maybe we don't have the time or space like, or we feel like, oh, maybe I'll be judged, so I'm not going to bring this up. And, I just feel like it's important to put these things out there, and we don't have to do it in a way where there's like, let's figure out whether or not that was your dad, but let's just share with each other what our experiences are so we can know that we're not alone,
Yeah,
right? And so that we can talk to each other and connect with each other around this, and just, you know, be okay with some of the unknowns, because I do feel like, and this is for myself and for a number of clients I've worked with, where there are these really pivotal moments that feel so meaningful and so powerful, right? To like speak to the, empty room essentially by all accounts of our senses, and then have something change. Like there's a lot of power in that. And having a dream where you feel like a visit, there's such a shift and so much meaning and power in that too. And so I just think it's important to bring those out, right? And to be able to share that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I mean, I agree. I think it's so much like in hearing, that's why I always love hearing people's stories and reading memoirs and stuff. And just, I think in hearing more about other people's stories and experiences, like it allows us to have more compassion and for ourselves and what we feel and what we've been through, and to like be like, oh, okay, oh, right. Okay. So it's like nobody else really had that exact example, but I feel like, yeah, it makes us like accept ourselves more. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's acceptance and there's potential for connection there.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a debate. It can just be a sharing. So, we gotta wrap up in a second here, and I have one more question. What brings you hope?
Huh. What brings me hope? I'm staring outside at nature. And
Yeah.
I was talking about my wonder walks. I don't know. I think, that's just what I'm going to go with, is like paying attention to nature and hope. And even like, I live in Southern California where there's not much shift in weather, but where I live, there's a variety of different trees where it's like forest and palm trees. Like I'm like at the base of mountains, which is cool. But
Yes.
like so I now I'm experiencing again like a tree in my front yard that everything died off it, and now like the green coming back. And I think that that's
Mm.
hopeful. And so like reminding ourselves when we're in these dark times and you're having a bad day or like whatever it is, like thinking of nature. And even like, so many of us can be hard on ourselves because we're just not feeling super productive or that. And it's like there's seasons for things and you're allowed yourself to have downtime and open. So I think like referencing nature can be very hopeful, that like this is might be what's happening right now and this is what I'm feeling right now, but that doesn't have to be for at my forever. And so
Mhm.
that it
Yeah.
feels more acceptable to allow yourself to be in that place right now. Like for me, acceptance ends up shifting so much for me. Like it's not, okay, I better accept this and then I'll feel better. But it like, so even naturally, like naming how I'm feeling, oh, I'm feeling scared right now. And just by me naming it, I feel like then I'm accepting, oh, okay. And then it makes it easier for me to shift through. Wow, you see my nice tangents there. I'm like, how did I? I'm like, I go from hope to like naming feelings, but like,
No, I mean, but it does connect, right? It goes like there's so much possibility in there. There's so much like I can step outside, I can witness nature, and from there, I can learn that there are seasons for things, and I can accept that there are seasons for things, and I feel this way today and I'll feel something
yeah,
else tomorrow. Or I think about it with seasons a lot with again, like being in connected to the running community and to a lot of athletes where I see people almost like asserting when they have to take an off season or their downtime, or I see this kind of pushback in the larger athletic culture of like, hey, rest is important too. Like we really need to rest. And I feel like that there is this culture of constant movement and constant effort, and you've got to work towards, especially when you talk about those big joys that you're chasing. Well, you've got to just hustle and all this, and nature doesn't do that. There's this quote I always get on my tea bag, those little tea bag quotes I always get. Nature never hurries, and yet everything is accomplished. And I'm like, thank you. Because I feel like we've, in this world where people have to assert rest is important. We're like, yeah, there's a day and a night. There's a winter and a summer. And sure, some places there's just a rainy season and a dry season, but like there are these rhythms and there are these polarities, and we sort of get duped into a narrative that we always need to be active or always need to be young or always need to be pushing and always need to be training, right? It's like it's not when you lift the weight that you get stronger, it's when you lift it and then go lie down. Right? And so
yeah,
that I think there is a lot of hope in looking to nature, and you know there's sort of some trust in that too, right? You said acceptance. There's acceptance, and then there's some amount of like, okay, these are these rhythms that I can ride through.
yeah, like trusting that you're going to get through that things are going to shift, whatever it is. And yeah, and a lot of those things that you were naming, like, in the recovery, whatever, it's again, because it's people are getting caught up on the shoulds, like, oh, I
Mm,
shouldn't rest, or I shouldn't be this tired, or I should be further along. Or again, it's like, well, why do I think what? Again,
yeah.
like it's like we're programmed to have all of these shoulds coming at us. And so I just hope to start to question them.
Yes. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about your book and just
So
be
I
in your
still have
world?
yourjoyologist.com, but I've also taken ownership of TriciaHuffman.com, which
Oh,
are now the same
right.
thing. But
I have the same thing. I have lisadanilchuk.com and howwecanheal.com, and someone just asked me, are those connected? I was like, I mean, you can go to either one, but I really use How We Can Heal.
no, they really are the same page right now. Like if you go to TriciaHuffman.com right now, it's just the same page, but eventually
Oh,
different. But yeah, and
perfect.
I'm on social media. I'm @_Tricia Huffman. You can get the book at ftheshouldstdotheonce.com. I mean, you can go anywhere to order it, but that's the like landing page that takes you everywhere, and to claim bonuses for ordering it.
It's
But
pre-order right now as we're recording, right? It's
yeah,
May
the book
10th,
comes out May 10th. So if you pre-order it, I got some awesome bonuses, including a 5 like part exclusive bonus that you can start right away, and you get a ticket to my launch party.
And so if we go to your launch party, do we get to call ourselves a joyologist too?
Yeah. Listen, people will send me messages all the time like, how do you become a good joyologist? And I'm like, great. Just be one. Just
Just
claim
be
it for
one.
yourself.
I love that. Like, where's your certification program? You're like, you're
Well,
certified. Go.
and I run a group coaching program once a year called Be Your Own Joyologist. And so it's
Mhm.
sort of like teaching all the tools for that. But yeah, it's again, I'm sort of like, well, I don't like have ownership of like, yeah, I guess I could create a like an accreditation for
Right.
becoming a joyologist. But
I love it though. It's like the name was given to you and you just spread the love, right? Like,
yeah.
let's all be joyologists. Well, thank you, Tricia. I love everything you do. I've been following you on social media since that day Sarah Bareilles posted your stuff 5, 10, however many years ago. And I've always appreciated just the upliftment. And I so appreciate learning more of your backstory and just feel that we all need some joy and we need to find it through life, not by avoiding life. So I really appreciate your message and I look forward to reading your book.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening. My hope is that you walk away from these episodes feeling supported and like you have a place to come to find the hope and inspiration you need to take your next small step forward. I do want to make sure it's clear that this podcast isn't offering any prescriptions. It's not advice or any kind of diagnosis. Your decisions are in your hands, and we encourage you to consult with any relevant healthcare professionals you may need to support you through your unique path of healing. For more information and resources, please visit my website, howwecanheal.com. There, you'll find tons of helpful resources and the full transcript of each show. You can also click the podcast menu to submit requests for upcoming topics and guests. Before we wrap, I want to send thanks to our guests today, to Christine O'Donnell and Celine Baumgartner of Brightsided Podcasting, and to everyone who helped support this podcast, directly and indirectly. Alex, thanks for taking the dogs out while I record. I'd also like to give a shout out to my brother Matt. He passed away in 2002. He wrote this music and recorded it, and it makes my